At the heart of Jung's typology is the idea of psychological types, characterized by a dominant function that channels an individual's primary way of engaging with the world. For someone who would later be identified as an INFJ, the dominant function is introverted intuition, supported by extrovert feeling, with introverted thinking and extrovert sensing playing tertiary and inferior roles. Jung discussed these functions in 1921, and although he did not arrange them in the way we now associate with types like INFJ, his insights into each function give us a deep understanding of INFJs. Check out our newly released INFJ playbook. The link is in the description of this video. Get your copy now. Jung described introverted intuition as a perceptive function that does not rely on direct sensory input, but instead perceives images, symbolic meaning, and internal visions. Unlike extrovert intuition, which scans external possibilities, introverted intuition moves inward and perceives patterns, archetypes, and connections below the surface of conscious awareness. According to Jung, this function tends to be mysterious and difficult for others to understand because it works with ideas that are often abstract, symbolic, and deeply subjective. In individuals for whom this function is dominant, such as the INFJ, it can manifest as profound insight, visionary thinking, and an uncanny ability to synthesize complex meanings from seemingly unrelated elements. Jung described this type of intuition as almost prophetic, oriented toward the possibilities and meanings behind external reality rather than reality itself. Supporting this internal visionary world is extrovert feeling, which Jung characterized as a judging function concerned with harmony, interpersonal ethics, and the collective mood of a social group. In the INFJ, Fey acts as an auxiliary function, meaning it helps bring the private insights of NI into a socially meaningful context. Jung spoke of extrovert feeling types as those who adapt their emotions and behavior to the needs and values of the external environment. In INFJs, this can produce a strong desire to help others, to mediate, and to maintain interpersonal peace. However, because this function is secondary to their internal vision, INFJs might appear outwardly empathetic while maintaining a private, often hidden, inner world that others rarely penetrate. The tertiary function, introverted thinking, is a more analytical and detached faculty that helps INFJs organize their insights into a logical framework, though this function often develops more fully later in life. Jung saw introverted thinking as focused on internal consistency and the development of precise internal concepts, rather than the application of logic to the external world. In the INFJ, this can result in a love for abstract theory or a need to understand the internal logic of systems, though it may be less developed or less visible than their intuitive and feeling traits. The inferior function for INFJs is extrovert sensing, a focus on the concrete, sensory details of the external world. According to Jung, the inferior function is the most unconscious and primitive aspect of the psyche, often causing imbalance or stress when it intrudes into consciousness. INFJs often report being overwhelmed by sensory input or disconnected from their immediate surroundings. However, through individuation, the process of psychological growth that Jung described as integrating all aspects of the self, INFJs can learn to develop a healthier relationship with this function. When mature, it may allow them to ground their visionary ideas in physical experience, creating a powerful balance between idealism and reality. Jung's idea of individuation is especially relevant to the INFJ type because they are drawn to meaning, purpose, and psychological depth. INFJs may feel a particularly strong call toward this journey of self-discovery and integration. Jung saw individuals with dominant introverted intuition as deeply concerned with symbols, myths, and archetypes, those elements of the collective unconscious that help shape our sense of identity and purpose. INFJs, in their striving for inner unity and harmony with the outer world, often embody this Jungian pursuit of wholeness, albeit through paths that can be intensely personal and, at times, isolating. While Jung did not label or group people into types as neatly as later theorists did, his rich analysis of the functions and attitudes gives us a deeply textured understanding of what would later be known as the INFJ. His writings help illuminate why INFJs are often described as enigmatic, emotionally attuned, and deeply insightful. Individuals who live at the intersection of vision and empathy, capable of perceiving unseen truths and translating them into compassionate action. Jung considered intuition to be one of the irrational functions, not irrational in a negative sense, but in that it does not operate according to logical or empirical evidence. It leaps rather than steps. When turned inward, as it is for an INFJ, intuition draws from the depths of the unconscious. It does not see with the physical eyes, but with what Jung called the inner eye. He noted that the introverted intuitive is preoccupied with what could be rather than what is, interested less in tangible facts and more in symbolic meanings, archetypal truths, and the evolution of inner images over time. This inward orientation can give INFJs the appearance of being out of step with ordinary life. Jung described introverted intuitives as potentially mystical or visionary, often misunderstood, and at risk of isolation because their insights are difficult to articulate and even more difficult for others to grasp. He spoke of such individuals as those who might sense shifts in human consciousness, anticipate cultural or psychological changes, or feel the pull of destiny, though not always able to explain how or why. This explains why many INFJs report feeling different or on the outside looking in, even from a young age. They are often deeply perceptive but may feel alienated because their insights do not always align with societal norms or expectations. Jung also highlighted the compensatory role of the inferior function, which in the case of INFJs is extrovert sensing. While introverted intuition leads the INFJ to live in a world of meanings and inner vision, say draws attention to raw sensory data, the textures, colors, tastes, and immediate reality of the material world. Because this function is inferior, Jung believed it resides largely in the unconscious and may emerge in uncontrolled or exaggerated ways. For the INFJ, this might manifest as sensory overload, a tendency to neglect practical matters, or sudden compulsions toward indulgence or thrill-seeking, often as a result of stress or repression. Jung viewed the integration of the inferior function as essential to psychological maturity. Therefore, for an INFJ, learning to appreciate and engage with the physical world without being overwhelmed by it is part of the individuation process. The role of the auxiliary function, extrovert feeling, brings the INFJ into connection with society. Jung described extrovert feeling types as highly attuned to the values and needs of others, often acting in ways that maintain social harmony or uphold group ideals. For the INFJ, faith serves as a bridge between their private inner world and the outer world of people. It allows them to communicate their insights in emotionally resonant ways and to tune in to the emotional atmosphere of a room. Jung warned, however, that when faith becomes too dominant in an introverted type, it can lead to excessive conformity or suppression of the individual's true feelings. INFJs, when unhealthy, may over-accommodate others at the cost of authenticity, eventually leading to emotional exhaustion or inner conflict. This is a key dynamic in many INFJs, the tension between serving others and staying true to their own vision. Another dimension worth exploring in Jung's framework is the concept of the shadow, those aspects of the personality that are rejected, repressed, or unconscious. For the INFJ, the shadow often contains the traits associated with their inferior functions, particularly extrovert sensation and perhaps a crude, reactive version of extrovert thinking. Jung believed that facing and integrating the shadow is essential for becoming whole. This might involve INFJs confronting their discomfort with spontaneity, embracing their physical instincts, or becoming more assertive and pragmatic, qualities they may unconsciously disdain or fear. Doing so doesn't mean abandoning their core nature, but enriching it through the inclusion of neglected parts of the self. Jung's broader concept of the self, as the organizing principle of the psyche, is particularly resonant for INFJs, who often feel an internal drive toward unity, purpose, and transformation. Unlike the ego, which is limited and partial, the self includes both conscious and unconscious elements, striving toward integration and balance. INFJs often feel this call toward wholeness acutely. They may find themselves drawn to personal development, spiritual paths, or healing professions, not just to help others, but because their own journey demands it. Jung emphasized that the path to the self involves engaging with inner images, symbols, and dreams, all domains in which introverted intuition thrives. Also, Jung's ideas about archetypes and the collective unconscious align well with the INFJ's deep interest in mythology, psychology, literature, and spirituality. INFJs often describe sensing themes that recur across people and cultures. Eternal motifs of the hero, the sage, the shadow, the anima/animus, which Jung believed reside in all humans. This gives INFJs a natural affinity for depth psychology, symbolic systems, and the exploration of unconscious patterns. They may be particularly suited to therapeutic, artistic, or philosophical pursuits, where they can make meaning from complexity and connect individual experiences to universal truths. Jung also noted that these intuitives may have trouble communicating their insights because they tend to emerge in a nonverbal, holistic flash, what today we might call a gut feeling or aha moment. This intuitive knowledge is not rational, and it may be difficult to trace its origin. INFJs often report this experience of knowing something without knowing why they know it. Jung called this the visionary aspect of the introverted intuitive, one that can be both profound and isolating. He acknowledged that such individuals are sometimes labeled as eccentric or aloof because their inner preoccupations are so far removed from ordinary concerns. It is also worth mentioning how time factors into the INFJ's inner world through the lens of Jung's theory. Introverted intuition, for Jung, has a relationship with time that is nonlinear. It may perceive events not just as sequences, but as patterns or cycles, sometimes giving the impression that the person is able to anticipate future outcomes or sense what is not yet visible. Jung was fascinated by this quality in intuitive types, seeing them as potential guides or prophets, capable of perceiving what is becoming before it fully arrives in the external world. The INFJ, being led by this function, may often feel as though they are living ahead of their time, or seeing realities others have yet to encounter. Yet, this orientation toward internal visions and future possibilities brings its own challenges. Jung warned that introverted intuitives may become disconnected from everyday life, losing touch with practical matters and current realities. This is especially true if their inferior function, extrovert sensing, remains unconscious and undeveloped. For INFJs, this can mean a blind spot regarding the physical world. They may neglect their surroundings, forget to eat or rest, or find themselves overwhelmed by environments that are too stimulating. However, Jung didn't see the inferior function as merely a weakness. Instead, he considered it a crucial entry point for growth. By gradually integrating extrovert sensing, INFJs can become more grounded, balanced, and effective in translating their inner vision into concrete results. This journey toward integration is key to Jung's idea of individuation, the process of becoming a whole and unified self. For Jung, individuation is not about becoming perfect or correct in a moral sense, but about achieving a synthesis of all parts of the psyche, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, rational and irrational, intuitive and sensing. For the INFJ, this path often involves learning to trust and express their inner knowledge, while also grounding it in the tangible world. They may need to engage in creative or physical practices, writing, dancing, building, gardening, that connect the internal with the external, the symbolic with the sensory. In this way, they enact the individuation process, bringing their internal vision to life in the world of form. Jung observed that introverted types may struggle with the pressure to adapt to collective norms. For INFJs, this often takes the form of suppressing their own needs or conforming outwardly while feeling inwardly distant. They may experience what Jung called persona inflation, the over-identification with a social mask, often one based on helpfulness, idealism, or moral integrity. This can lead to burnout or emotional suppression if they lose touch with their authentic self. Jung emphasized the importance of shadow work, bringing the disowned or unconscious aspects of the personality into awareness. For INFJs, this may mean acknowledging feelings of anger, pride, or desire that conflict with their ideal self-image. The goal is not to eliminate these parts, but to integrate them, to become whole. In this way, Jung's work on dreams, active imagination, and archetypal symbols becomes particularly useful for the INFJ. These practices offer tools to access the unconscious directly, to dialogue with hidden parts of the psyche, and to discover the symbolic threads that run through one's personal mythology. INFJs often find that their dreams are rich in meaning, frequently featuring spiritual, mythological, or heroic imagery. Jung believed that these dream images are not random, but deeply personal messages from the self, guiding the individual toward balance and wholeness. For INFJs, interpreting such dreams can be not only enlightening, but spiritually nourishing, affirming their sense of inner purpose. Jung also stressed the value of creative expression as a means of psychic integration. Art, writing, music, and symbolic design were for him not just cultural products, but psychological acts, ways of embodying the unconscious and giving it form. INFJs, with their deep inner worlds and powerful feeling function, often resonate with this. They may feel an urge to create not for fame or recognition, but to articulate the ineffable, to reveal the unseen, to make meaning from suffering or confusion. Jung would likely say that this artistic impulse is not optional, but essential for such a type. It is part of how they heal themselves and contribute to the collective unconscious. Although Carl Jung never used the term INFJ, his writings provide the philosophical and psychological bedrock upon which the idea stands. The INFJ is best understood not through surface traits, but through the deep psychological mechanisms Jung outlined. Introverted intuition's vision, extrovert feelings ethical concern, introverted thinking structuring capacity, and the tension with extrovert sensation as the doorway to individuation. To be an INFJ in the Jungian sense is to be on a lifelong quest toward wholeness, drawn ever inward toward meaning, yet always seeking to serve and uplift the outer world. Check out our newly released INFJ playbook. The link is in the description of this video. Get your copy now.